Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlon, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. Jack, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a great Wednesday. Wow, I almost just blanked on the day. And we have a great podcast episode in the hopper for today. Sunbelt Media Day gave us a lot of content to talk about. I was hating on Media Day early yesterday morning. Maybe I've come around on it a little bit.
It does provide some content, even though it's a little bit fluffy.
It's all fluff. No one asks real questions at Media Day. And that's not shade at anyone. I mean, I was producing for ESPN Richmond yesterday, and it was all ACC Media Day, and it was just kind of the same questions over and over again. And I get it. You can't ask Mario Cristobal, why did you run it when you should have kneeled it? Like, I understand why, but it's just sometimes you want a little more meat on the bone.
There's also not a lot of candid responses, right? Because you'll have, the ACC's got 18 teams now. You'll have the 18th place head coach get up there and tell you that he thinks, or maybe they have 17, the Big Ten is 18, but they'll get up there and tell you, I like our guys. And it's like, no, well, one of you is going to finish last.
One of you guys don't actually like your guys, and you're actually pretty pissed with your transfer portal haul. I will say there was a really good candid moment, and this is me just pitching for ESPN Richmond here. I was on Border to Border with Matt Josephs at Mid-Major Matt, but he had a really good interview with Cam Butler, and Cam Butler for UVA is a transfer from Miami of Ohio, and he brought up Maction, and you could tell Cam Butler was just like, what? We're talking and got really into it. And it's like, I watch it every week. The guys in the locker room don't understand that this is football. And they had a 3-minute conversation about Maction at ACC Media Day.
I like that. See, that's a little bit better than most of what you're going to get.
Yeah, most of what you get is going to be, we worked really hard this offseason. We believe we have the team, our physicality, our toughness. It can really come together and be great for insert team name here.
A lot of position groups, Jack, that are about to surprise people.
Well, a lot of people came in best shape of their lives. Wait, it's not camp season yet. That's still a few days away. That's when we get best shape of our lives.
Best shape of our lives is coming. Guys are clicking. You'll get to mid-August and it'll be, they're so sick of hitting each other. They just want to hit an opponent.
They can't wait for August 31st against Charlotte. Jeez Louise. Nathan out of from the top rope, just talking all things tight end already. Okay, I think Logan Kyle can be like Riley Stapleton. Nathan, I got to ask, have you been playing college football 25? Because Logan Kyle is overhyped, overrated, not overrated, but very powerful. He's like a speedy tight end.
Chesney did kind of hype transfer tight end. So I wonder if he is excited about Kyle, and then Taylor Thompson's transfer from the last season.
And Kai Wright's a transfer from last season.
So yeah, he thinks, I don't know. I think the offense could be good. We'll get into that in a minute, but some interesting stuff from Chesney mixed in with quite a bit of fluff.
Nathan said, he is crazy. I knew it. The crossing routes with Logan Kyle on College Football 25 are unstoppable. So before we dive into all things Sunbelt Media Day, we did talk with Bennett. You want to hit the last name for me?
I believe it's Bill Papierniak.
Bill Papierniak, former general manager for the Richmond Flying Squirrels, kind of bounced around the minor leagues for a while, a 1995 grad of JMU. We brought him on, pure July content, really great conversation with him about kind of his experience being the GM of the Flying Squirrels, his experience around minor league baseball. We have about a 5-minute clip from that interview we're about to play. The full interview can be found up on our YouTube later today. So let's throw it on over to Bill Papierniak and his experience as a GM of the Richmond Flying Squirrels. Then we'll go Sunbelt Media Day, breaking that all down after this 5-minute interview.
Bill Papierniak to the podcast. We're excited to have Bill on. He's been the GM of the Flying Squirrels, 3 World Series rings in his possession. He's a guy who knows a ton about baseball. Bill, thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Gotta start asking first that being the GM of the Flying Squirrels, getting those 3 World Series wins since they're an affiliate of the San Francisco Giants, what is that process like working within the organization with the Flying Squirrels?
Well, it's you're an affiliate of a major league club, so you work with them, but you don't have the actual decisions on the player personnel. You have all the other decisions with as far as how everything's run from a business, from a day-to-day, and from everything from how to get the players to the field itself, the stadium itself. So you really just handle the business end of everything, and they handle the player personnel. Now you work with them on a lot of those things, and you're a little bit involved, but you don't actually get to say, I want this guy, I want that guy. And
Impressive stuff. I know you did a bunch of stuff in professional baseball prior to being the GM of the Flying Squirrels. Can you take us through, I guess, how somebody goes from college to then the GM of minor league baseball team?
well, I think it's very different now. When I was in college, since I graduated in '95, that there was a different path. JMU didn't even have sports management at that point. So I was just actually a business management major. That was when cell phones weren't even really around. So the way for me to get a job is I actually started just mailing out resume after resume, then started going to ballpark after ballpark, just knocking on the door and saying I'll do anything. Just give me an opportunity. And I was fortunate enough that the Pirates affiliate at the time in Lynchburg offered me a glorified internship, big whopping $12,500 a year to start. And minor league baseball and Major League Baseball, it's a lot the same. You start out making next to nothing, and it takes years and years and years of doing a lot of grunt work to move your way up the ladder.
I'm always really fascinated because I was an intern for the Fightin' Phils and they dressed me up as like a vegetable for mascot races like 15 times one summer. But I'm always curious because minor league baseball teams do so many different creative things to get people to come to games and get butts and seats. What did you guys do over your various stops to get people to come? And I guess, is any of that applicable to sort of college sports or college baseball? I know JMU fans are always talking about small baseball crowds and how to keep fans like engaged at football games.
Well, I mean, I think it is. I mean, I want to say that I learned a lot on how to put people in the ballpark. Um, just in my time, I spent some time when I was in Hagerstown. That was owned by Mandalay Sports, who I'm not sure if you're really familiar with a lot of that backstory, but they had the Dayton team that had sold out so many years in a row. That was their first foray into minor league baseball. But before they had worked with some different people that had success in the NBA. And the biggest thing to draw people is what do people want to come see? And it can be a speaker, it can be any type of giveaway, it can be something you're doing. So I mean, I've wrestled alligators, I've given away funerals, I've if there's something to do that I did. I mean, I've dressed up as a woman and drug the field before for our drag queens. And
Yeah, the Richmond Flying Squirrels drag queens.
I've done just about all those things. And the best thing when you come to a new area is you get to redo all the stuff you did before that worked well, and everybody thinks it's brand new. So that was that was fun. But yeah, I would say that's the key is just how do you get people to come out? Is it because their kids coming? Is it because you've touched their heartstring? Is it because it's a great deal? I am of the belief that I mean, I think, just to get on a totally different subject, that you have to be careful when you're setting up things. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about expanding Bridgeforth, for example, that you don't want to expand it too soon. And I know you guys have been proponents of that if you do and you lose the demand always has to exceed the supply for you to continue to grow. So the second it doesn't, that's when you start to see fall off. And the second you don't have packed houses, it just doesn't stop. It continues to get worse and worse and worse unless you can prove to do that. And that's it's challenging because you want to move as fast as you can. And if you can sell it out in 1 year, great, but can you sell it out in 10 and 15 years still? Or can you have a packed house? And that's the biggest challenge to how to draw is really how do you create a demand and how do you not have enough supply to meet that demand? And it sounds terrible, but you want people not to be able to get tickets.
Good stuff from Bill.
Great stuff. I do really enjoy his point on Bridgeforth Stadium and expansion. I just agree with anyone that agrees with me. Honestly, that's kind of how I approach life.
That's a smart way to do it. And you can find the rest of that on our YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, it'll be up on our YouTube later today. The full interview with him, more insights into minor league baseball, kind of overall thoughts on JMU baseball. We talk a little bit about on that, and Bennett and him go over memories of their times with minor league baseball a little bit more in depth. You talk a little bit more about being the carrot.
Yeah, I ran hard, but not well enough to win.
That's a bummer, man. Did you ever win? So you ran like 15 races and
Ran
you never
about
won?
15 races, kind of the Lions 0-16 season type of thing, where
Oh.
I was struggling. Toward the end, I would convince. So it's 4 interns racing.
You would convince people to let you win?
Yeah, I got some, built some good relationships there. I had to try to get people to let me win, and then one guy was like, "Nah, I'm running hard, but you two can try to like box me out because it'll be fun." They tried to box him out, and I still couldn't do it. He worked his way past me. So
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's a bummer. All right. You know what wasn't a bummer?
Sunbelt Media Day.
Sunbelt Media Day. It happened yesterday. It's still happening today, but it's with the West teams today, and we don't really care about the West teams outside of Jordan McLeod, the former JMU star quarterback, who then found his way to GJ Kinney and Texas State and San Marcos. They're going to be okay. Let's talk about that since the West is on the podium today and Texas State just got off the podium. Can we talk about how good Texas State is going to be this year? Because I think they are going to win the Sun Belt.
I think they're going to have by far the best offense. I have a couple questions defensively, but they should make some strides there. Schedule is kind of favorable. They got UTSA and Arizona State in the non-conference, but both at home. I'd be very surprised if they don't win the West, or I guess worst case, maybe they finish like second or third. You could have some injuries. You never know. But that offense is stacked, dude. A lot of good linemen. McLeod's a beast. Their running back is probably the best running back in the Sun Belt. Receiving core looks good. I mean, and the scheme's incredible.
If you beat Arizona State at home and UTSA at home in the non-conference early on in the season and then start 4-5-0 in Sun Belt play, no major injuries really occur, and you can just kind of ride that momentum, they're going to be the favorite to make the college football playoff pretty early on in this season. I think they are going to be, them and maybe Boise State will be the two teams in the conversation. And that, again, not taking anything away from JMU in that, because I think JMU will be in the conversation as well. But the marquee games for JMU are Charlotte, at UNC, not really even Charlotte. Like, it's really at UNC. Like, it's a down year for the Tar Heels. So,
yeah, if JMU loses to North Carolina, you probably can't make much of a push for the Sun Belt Championship really until November, right? When you get at App State, I think would be your signature win that you could go with, and then win the Sun Belt Championship. If App turns out to be good, and they certainly look on paper like they could be scary.
Yeah. Nathan said, I guarantee if JMU plays Texas State in the Sun Belt Championship at JMU, it's the biggest boo ever is going to go crazy. I wouldn't boo Jordan McLeod. I don't think it's his fault he's at Texas State.
I wouldn't boo him for that either. I also think a thing that JMU fans are maybe letting go sort of under the radar in these fantasies, I think it's easier to win the West than the East.
Much easier.
There's a decent chance the West team hosts. Like, I don't know, you can't boo them in San Marcos, you know what I mean? Like, it could be Texas State and Jordan McLeod on the road, which would be very challenging.
I mean, the West winner will likely win the West. If we're thinking Texas State, maybe with no losses.
It's possible, right? And then they might have an undefeated record overall. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but they're going to be very competitive. I think Louisiana's got some nice players too. Like, it's not a guarantee that the East hosts the championship game.
Yes. The East will likely be, the winner of the East will likely be a 1 or 2 loss team. And Texas State will likely, or the winner of the West will likely be a 1 or no loss team.
It's going to be really hard to go undefeated in the Sun Belt East, and that might be what JMU needs to do to like make the playoff and host the championship game.
Yeah. All right. So that's enough West talk. Let's focus in solely on JMU here. You wrote over on our newly redesigned website, jmusportsnews.com, some of your biggest takeaways from the kind of main stage, main podium portion of Media Day yesterday with JMU football. One of your biggest takeaways is going to be that the defensive line should still be elite.
Yeah, I thought Chesney talked glowingly. He did some of his best comments when he was just interviewed like one-on-one on ESPN Plus, not on the main stage. But there's a Chesney quote. He said, the amount we lost is very, very hard to replace, right? But at the same point...
Real quick. In post-game pressers, let's count the amount of rights he says.
It's going to be a lot. And then he says, but at the same point in time, when you get a chance to learn about these guys and meet these guys on the field, I think you'll be very impressed, which does kind of make sense. They got Emmanuel Bush in the middle, who's supposed to be really, really good. And we talked about this last time, that he's up to like 330 pounds, just an absolute monster of a man. They added Terry Lockett from Syracuse, who I think is expected to play inside a lot. Wouldn't be shocked if he starts next to Bush because you still have 600 combined pounds with those two. And then Eric O'Neill from Long Island is just a really good player. He was named preseason all-second team in the Sun Belt despite never playing an FBS down. And then Lloyd Summerall is one that I think was kind of an unknown coming from Florida and then South Florida last year off the edge. Chesney kind of seems to keep mentioning him.
Look, I know last week I did this, and I probably will continue doing this throughout the offseason. But college football 25, man, they have Lloyd Summerall as the number one impact player on the defensive side for JMU. He's a dog in the game.
He also has like legit Power 5 star. He's like 6'6", like 240, 250. I mean, he's built like a legitimate NFL edge. I think he had 4.5 sacks last year for South Florida. So he was starting to produce for a South Florida team that actually was pretty decent in the American. So yeah, I think he's a potential starter on the edge with Eric O'Neill. The starting unit's really good. They have a lot of depth. Chris Fitzgerald's a big defensive tackle from Youngstown State. They brought in Mans from Colorado and Maine, who's listed as a linebacker, but Chesney kind of mentioned him off the edge. They still have Amar Thomas, some other returners in the middle. I think the defensive line obviously lost a ton, right? But they should be good.
Yeah, lost. What did they lose? Jalen Green, James Carpenter,
Chroma,
Jamry Chroma,
Kamara,
Mikel Kamara.
And I looked it up. Those 4 guys specifically last year combined for 68 tackles for loss. I mean, that's spectacular.
A lot of those are anchored by Jalen Green, who graduated, didn't transfer. But no, you lose a lot. Mikel Kamara was fantastic. Big reason why Jalen Green was able to get so many sacks and be so dominant last year was that you couldn't double anyone because everyone was so good. So
should still be good though, which I think is quite interesting.
I'm really excited for it. I think Lloyd Summerall is going to be a dog, and I am basing a lot of that off on college football 25. But it just feels like we say this every podcast. We say this about every position group, man. They got the potential to be good. They have the potential to be really good.
Talent's there, right? I think you can make a case as the most talented JMU football roster ever.
Sure. On paper, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year's is probably competitive, right? It's hard to argue that an FCS roster was due to the lack of scholarships, like the scholarship difference.
That's a good point. I think
probably arguing over the last 3 years, but I think it might be more talented than last year's roster. I thought last year's roster
right now it is
a lot. I'm not saying they're going to win 11 games, but I think last year's team like maximized almost everything they could get out of one possession games.
That's very true. That is very true. Have you ever thought about this? That if JMU lost one, maybe 2 of those games, maybe the UVA game and Utah State game, how different this offseason would have been? Signetti likely would have stayed.
I don't think Indiana was all that interested, right?
Like all of those players probably stay, and JMU and App are Goliaths in the Sun Belt East.
Yeah, it's crazy how just winning, right? A couple things, late plays. I mean, they beat UVA by 1. They had a 2-point conversion where McLeod almost threw a pick that went the other way, that they would have lost it. They had 4th and 20. They don't cover a guy, but Calandria overthrows him. So yeah, they had some fortunate breaks, I think, where they are very talented and were very talented, but the talent on the roster this year is it's pretty wild.
Yeah, kind of insane that Io Adei did not get any preseason Sun Belt mention.
Surprised by that. 1,000 yards in the AAC. What was he? 7 yards a carry, basically. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. What's another big takeaway you had?
Okay, so Chesney has not officially named a starting quarterback, but I do think we really need to put that to bed, and I think he will put it to bed faster than Signetti did.
Yes, I agree. You were reading this comment. I could see it in your eyes.
I was reading this, talking about the secondary, which I guess we can get to that now. You want to talk about Dylan Morris? You want to talk secondary?
We'll talk Dylan Morris because I got some things to get off my chest. But then we'll dive into secondary. Nathan bringing up some good points. If you're watching the stream, you could read the comment. We'll get to the comment later on in the podcast. Dylan Morris is quarterback 1. If you want to win the Sun Belt East, Dylan Morris is your quarterback 1. We're not doing this whole Rick and Marole thing again. And I get it. You have to report on what Chesney's saying, and Chesney is
kind of
throwing up smoke and mirrors. But it's worth noting that Dylan Morris is a Pac-12 starter who was all Pac-12. What was it? Second team in 2020. He had a little bit of a down. He had a little bit of a down year in 2021, and then Michael Penix came in when Kalen DeBoer came in. Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for UW, made Michael Penix amazing, and Michael Penix, of course, Penix. Don't say his last name wrong because you can get into some trouble.
That's
Michael
exactly right.
Penix steps in, the Heisman winner, as Chesney likes to believe. Morris learns underneath him. He comes over. But Barnett and Atkins, maybe they have more experience at JMU, but this is an entirely new coaching staff, so you can throw all of that experience away. Plus, their experience isn't the best. Billy Atkins, rough starts, and Alonzo Barnett had a rough half in his lone start when he was named QB1 to start last year against Bucknell. You got J.C. Evans, an unproven freshman, who will likely redshirt this year. Come on.
It's not even.
He's QB1. Dylan Morris is QB1.
So last year we took some heat, right? Because we said McLeod was QB1. They named a different starter, and then McLeod wins Sun Belt Player of the Year. So I don't want to take a full L on that or a victory lap because it was a strange season. But I don't know what was going on in practice that McLeod wasn't the guy. But anyway,
I think Cignetti was just mad at him.
I think Cignetti just had a weird beef with McLeod. I don't know. Anyway, here's a quote from Chesney. This was down in the main stage. This is when he did the one-on-one on ESPN Plus. But he says, "We always have a competition, but Dylan came in here and his ability to process football at a high level and his ability to lead, his ability to understand intent of plays, his schematic competence, his situational awareness is through the roof. He's the starter."
Can I also say something else that maybe I'm looking too much into this? That quote and Dylan Morris moved him and his fiance across the country for this. I don't think he's doing that to be a backup. And I know I said a similar thing with Jordan McLeod last year, but for Dylan Morris, it feels a little bit more meaningful considering he moved, in theory, his family across the country to Harrisonburg to be the starter, right? If he was going to compete for a backup position, he could have either stayed at UW, gone anywhere on the West Coast or in the middle of the country in Big Sky country, but he chose to come to JMU probably because a starting job was wink, wink, nudge, nudge guaranteed to him.
I said this last year, and I still stand by this take where I was like, I don't know if you're rolling out a young, inexperienced quarterback at UVA.
Yes.
And they didn't. they didn't do that. It seemed like they were going to, but they didn't end up doing that. And I think McLeod's experience kind of showed up pretty big in that game. He was kind of up and down, but he had the 2 drives late that were huge, started the game really well. McLeod was not the reason that they struggled. It was the secondary was getting absolutely torched against UVA. McLeod played a very good game in that contest. He looked very poised. Dylan Morris has been around football a while. He played on a team that played in the national championship game last year. He has started in the Pac-12. You mentioned Ryan Grubb. He's the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks.
Yeah, he is, baby. Super Bowl. Sorry.
I like the coaches that left JMU last year. Ryan Grubb's a better offensive coordinator than Shanahan and Sunseri.
And Kalen DeBoer was a greater coach than Kurt Cignetti. There's one of them went to Alabama. The other one went to a struggling Big Ten school that hasn't been relevant ever.
One of them went to Alabama. The other one talks about Alabama a lot. So it's very different. And I think Cignetti's a really good coach. I am not going to discount that. But Dylan Morris has played football. They opened the year at Charlotte. Their 3rd game of the year is at North Carolina. Alonzo Barnett and Billy Atkins have not shown that they can go out and win a college football game yet. Dylan Morris has.
Yeah.
So he's also, his quotes are yeah, there's a competition, but one of the guys totally understands what we're trying to do offensively, understands schemes, understands how to read defenses really well. That guy's going to be your starting quarterback. So I think he's going to name it pretty early. He said when it makes it clear, when it becomes clear during camp, He'll announce it. I don't think it's going to take very long.
It'll probably be like day 1 of camp. Dylan
Yeah,
Morris is quarterback 1.
He'll probably do it honestly in the first week of camp. It's not going to be a Signetti thing where he's like, you'll find out on game day. I think he's going to know, the team's going to know, and he's not going to have Jordan McLeod taking second team reps all summer and setting the offense back. Like, I think Chesney's very intentional with what they're doing, and Dylan Morris is pretty clearly the guy.
Yeah. Okay. So moving from the quarterback, we'll move one position backwards real quick. Ross or 11, will Ayo Adeyi be JMU's first Heisman winner? Ross, love this question. He did win Heisman in College Football 25 for my dynasty in year 1. Figured out how to run the zone option effectively. He would rush for 300 yards per game and 4 touchdowns. It was ungodly what he was able to do in that video game.
I think they're going to be really good running the ball this year. The offensive line should be pretty good. Chesney was talking them up at media day. So I feel really confident in kind of the entire offense.
Yeah. I think it'll be very good. I think the entire offense will be very good. I think Adeyi is going to be one of the best, if not the best, running back in the Sun Belt.
I think so too. I think he was a snub on those teams. I also think the East in general is going to be a lot of fun. Just listening to some of those coaches talk about their teams. Georgia Southern, I think, is underrated. ODU might be underrated. Coastal's going to be a bowl team, I think. Like, they're a competitive team, even if they don't win the East. We'll see what Marshall does. App State is sick. Like, I saw some people like, oh, JMU should be one. App State is disgusting, and what they return is unbelievable. Like, the receiving core is loaded. Offensive line is really good. They get their quarterback back. They're good.
App?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are good.
App's frightening to me.
Sorry, I got a little distracted there. I heard Eva come home above me, and I thought it was a robber for a second. So I had to text her and make sure that it was actually her.
Good call. Good call. If you didn't get a text back, you got to text the robber and be like, hey, I'm podcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold off on everything.
Exactly. Any other takeaways on the offensive side of the ball? I mean, Taji Hudson.
Hudson's an interesting one, yeah. So they bring him, big guy, but he's had a couple great off seasons now, so you kind of need to see it on the field. But I guess he was banged up last year more than we were told. It sounded like.
Did he bring that up in the in his interviews?
I think Chesney did. I think he said he was dealing with a wrist and a various injury. He might have missed some time too, Hudson. I can't remember, but he was a little banged up. Sounds like
he played in all 13 games last year. Okay. He made 3 starts, 8 catches last year for 88 receiving yards.
I think he's definitely gonna have a bigger role this year. Super athlete, which is exciting, and it sounds like they are absolutely gonna keep like Hudson passes in the playbook, which I'm pretty sure he did during the spring game. So no surprises.
He also threw for a touchdown last year. Had the same amount of passing touchdowns as he did receiving touchdowns a year ago. Omarion Dollison doesn't get the love that he deserves in media day hype, but that's besides the point.
Well, I'm interested to see what they do with him and Ymir Knight, who are both like really dangerous, kind of gadgety players, but haven't gotten a ton of mentions yet. We're also not to camp yet.
Yes. All right. Anything else offensively?
Not a lot. I think they'll be good.
I think they'll be very good. Moving to the other side of the ball, Nathan said his concern for this run defense is against UNC's running back, specifically Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton, one of the better running backs in the entire nation. So let's start there with the defensive line. Quickly talk about them again. We already brought them up earlier, but do you see any flaw, or did they let on any flaw with this defensive line? Arguably the front seven, because Jacob Dobbs, the linebacker, was there. Did they let on that maybe they're a little worried, or was it all, roses and sunshine and rainbows?
It seems really positive on like every position group. So we need to see it come together, obviously, but I don't know. I mean, they obviously lost a lot of spectacular talent, but Emmanuel Bush is big time in the trenches, I think. Fitzgerald from Youngstown State's really good in there. Terry Lockett can play inside. He's pretty good in there. And then like O'Neal and Summerall might be one of the best like edge combos in the Sun Belt.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of gives me flashbacks to last year with Jalen Green and Mikel Kamara on the 2 edges, where you can't, if you double Summerall, O'Neal will probably be able to break through. And if you double O'Neal, then Summerall on the other side. And then Mans seems like he's going to be pretty good too, as like a third edge guy who has Power 5 experience. That D-line, maybe I'm coming around on it a little bit more.
They could be good. I think O'Neal probably doesn't get the credit he deserves from JMU fans, especially like in the run game. 2023 NEC Defensive Player of the Year. He had 80 tackles as an edge and 23 and a half tackles for loss.
That's pretty good.
5.5 sacks. So he was doing a lot of his damage in the run game.
Yeah.
Like he's a stud.
He's going to be very good.
They played Ohio, which is
you love Eric O'Neal too. You've been on him since.
Love the dude. Well, they played like one FBS team last year. It was Ohio, which is a bold team from the MAC, solid team. He had like 13 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. He had an interception in that game. There was a tip ball that he caught. Just dominant against like a quality MAC team. I don't know, man. You put him in the Sun Belt. There's some teams in the Sun Belt that are worse than Ohio, I can tell you that. So he's going to have a chance to really feast, especially with guys around him that are significantly better, right? He wasn't flanked by a 330-pound Emmanuel Bush, Terry Lockett, and then a guy who started his career at Florida on the other edge.
Yes. Pretty nice.
Yeah.
Nathan brought this up. We'll move from kind of this front seven area, bring it back a little bit. People are overlooking our secondary. It could be scary. Sorry, I'm trying to decipher it.
You get Chris Sharon from UConn and then Ray Williams from Howard. They did bring a lot in the secondary from the portal.
Yes. Did they bring up anything? The reason I keep asking Bennett, for the listeners, I keep asking Bennett these questions because he was locked in all day on ESPN Plus, watching every second of Sunbelt Media Day.
Watched Sunbelt Media Day, had a good time, listened to the Dukes talk. They didn't bring up the secondary a ton, other than like they knew after the spring, Chesney made it seem like we had some secondary holes, which is why he brought in 1 million guys.
And they're all changing their roster designation every day.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think secondary is still to be determined. He did mention that Chauncey Logan had a really good offseason and like admittedly probably left some plays on the field in 2023.
Yeah, he did.
But he was talking about how he's got like a 40-inch vertical, 6'2", super explosive player, and now they're starting to add some it seems like he's maybe polishing his game a little bit more, which is important. So I think there's a lot of room for optimism there. There's definitely bodies that are good in the secondary, but that's still my question mark for sure. Because it's a difference to be like, we love the traits, we brought in some veterans, and then like, okay, can you stay in front of North Carolina's receivers?
Yeah. So where do you want to go from here? Do you want to talk kind of Keith Gill overall statements, or do you want to go to listener questions?
Let's do a Keith Gill. Let's do a little Keith Gill talk.
All right. So Keith Gill said at the start of Media Day, I'll set this up and I'll give you the slow pitch. You knock this one out of the park. Keith Gill said they have no interest in a group of 5 playoff. They want to be in the college football playoff. They don't want to be a part. They don't even want to entertain the questions of splitting off and doing this group of 5 playoff. He thinks that they are good enough to compete in the college football playoff. And on top of that, they are going to keep the division system, the East and West. They're the only conference in the entire nation among group of 5 and Power 5 schools to have this type of East-West division at the FBS level. They're going to keep it for as long as it's beneficial to them. Takeaways from Keith Gill's kind of big-time comments at the start of Sunbelt Football Media Day.
I really like Keith Gill. That's kind of my takeaway.
Do you know he was the Richmond AD?
Yeah.
I
feel
didn't
like
know
he
that.
just knows what he's talking about and he says the right things. Like I'm glad that he went out and was vocally against the like idea that the G5 should be separate. I think that's great for the teams at the top of the G5. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like I think
it's great for ULM.
Yeah, I don't think ULM belongs like right now as they currently sit. I'm not sure that team belongs on the same football field as like Ohio State or even like lesser than that. Let's go with like Clemson, right? Clemson's not using the portal. So they're not like Clemson's like a fringe playoff team to me. I don't think Clemson's winning the national championship, but they could be in the 12-team field. App State plays at Clemson this year. I think App can hang in the game. ULM would get their butts whooped. So if you're App or you're JMU, you absolutely don't want your conference, which is viewed by a lot of metrics as the best G5, having a commissioner who's like, I don't know, that'd be interesting. Yeah, maybe we just play each other. It's like they don't want that. They want the prize at the end that keeps them on the same field with those teams. Like North Carolina last year had Drake May and some good players. App State took them to overtime, and App State had 5 losses last year.
Yeah.
Those top teams belong on the same field as Power 5 teams. So I was impressed by that. I like that. I also thought his comments about divisions made sense. They love the divisions. But if there comes a point, like let's say App State goes, I don't even know the scenario, but let's say App State like is clearly the best team in the Sun Belt, but they take like an extra loss because the East is significantly harder schedule wise, and then they like blow out Texas State in the Sun Belt Championship or something, but don't get in the playoff. Then yeah, maybe you start to look and think, should we have the schedules be a little bit more even, with the end goal of getting a team in the playoff, but also realizing that like fans like the regional rivalry. So it's a tough balance, and I think they're in a good spot right now.
I think as long as one of the two divisions is really strong, then you're going to keep the divisions. Like if all of a sudden you have, just because this is the JMU podcast, if you have JMU as the only good team in the East and you have Texas State as the only good team in the West, kind of similar to how basketball played out this year, where like the two top teams were JMU and App, and then after that there were no good opportunities to play each other. If you kind of have that where then all of a sudden JMU is playing a cupcake schedule in the East and this one team in the West is playing a cupcake schedule, and then the two divisions don't overlap and you're not playing each other until the championship game. And then all of a sudden, if you slip up one or two games in the regular season, then you're not playing against each other. That's the only way I can see the divisions being scrapped. As long as one division is at least really competitive, I think they'll keep it.
I guess the biggest fear, and it took me a while to process this, but I think I've finally gotten there.
Okay.
I think the biggest fear is kind of like what you described exactly with that JMU App basketball thing. So let's say JMU goes undefeated in non-conference this year. Let's say App goes undefeated with a win over Clemson. Both those teams win every other Sun Belt game except for when they play each other. So it's, let's say App loses to JMU at home. JMU's in the Sun Belt Championship at 12-0
against a bad Louisiana team.
Yeah, and let's say Louisiana's like 8-4, but they went 7-1 in Sun Belt games. So then you would have one team that has no chance of making the playoff playing one team that does have a chance, where in theory you'd rather have App and JMU play again because the winner of that game would have a great chance. So that's kind of where you get.
Great way to put that. You put what I tried to say in a much longer explanation, much cleaner.
So yeah, so you get screwed if you have, so it's like you're saying, like if one of the divisions just can't hold its own, that's when you have the issue. Because if like the two best teams in the East are clearly playoff contenders, but one of the teams in the West stinks, that's an issue. But like last year, JMU versus Troy, the winner of that game would have had a case to be better than Liberty to get into the. So I think it's fine right now. It just depends if that becomes a concern. And then the issue is if you don't switch divisions, it does probably have to burn you once before you switch, right? So you might have a situation like that where even like Texas State and Louisiana are great, but the East champ isn't as good. And maybe they win the championship and you get burned or something.
I mean, heck, you may have to be burned twice on it, because I think it's such a thing about the Sun Belt is that they have these divisions, they have these regional rivalries, and you only have to go far distances in your travel once or twice a season. I think for the Sun Belt, they've kind of dug their feet into this whole divisional setup and regional rivalries. It might have to burn you twice, maybe 3 times before you make the move, because what if it happens this year? What if it's App and JMU are the two clear best teams in the Sun Belt? Could, in theory, both go undefeated and not, like, in theory, that could happen. Yeah. And then in the West, you're 1 or 2 injuries away from all of a sudden it being a very weak division, because you got Troy, you got Texas State, kind of Louisiana. We'll see how the Raging Cajuns come out. People are seemingly high on Arkansas State for some reason. I'm not sure why, but like, say there's some injuries and all of a sudden they look a lot worse than what they could potentially be. It'll burn you this year. I don't think they're then making the change next year. And I think you got to get burned another couple times. But I, for one, would love just to keep the divisions, even if it burns you, because as a old FCS lover, I loved the playoffs and those games meaning something. However, I've now changed my tune entirely, because having games against Marshall and ODU and App State and Georgia Southern, these really fun games in October and November, make the full season just so much more enjoyable. I'd rather keep that than ditch it for a potential chance to make a playoff. It feels like we're then just going back to FCS days.
Preach. Totally agree. I think like the regular season's so good. And then also in our scenario, like where you're getting burned, you would need the crappier team
To
to
win.
pull an upset on the road.
Yeah.
Right. So if it was like undefeated JMU's playing like 4-loss Louisiana in Bridgeforth, undefeated JMU would have to lose to 4-loss Louisiana, which like if that's the case, like maybe you don't deserve to be in the playoff. So like if you can't beat Louisiana, but you want a chance to play like at Michigan in December, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you win that game. Let's move over to some listener questions here. Daniel Merriman, what piece of media day info surprised you the most, Bennett?
That's a good question. I don't think any of it was stunning. Maybe the like somewhat unprompted love from Chesney for the D line.
That's good. For me, it was the use of "but" by Chesney when describing the quarterback competition.
There's a competition, but like it's not competitive anymore.
Whenever you're talking about a competition and you use the word "but," there's no competition. This is from Joey Needham. Who is one Sunbelt team that you feel is flying under the radar in the preseason that can end up making some noise in the conference for football? Me.
Go.
ODU.
Yeah, you're an ODU stand.
Who was I last year?
Georgia State.
Well,
they started really hot.
They started super hot, then they flamed out in epic fashion, and their coach left to be the tight ends coach for South Carolina. And but ODU is my team this year. That's my dark horse team. I don't think they're getting enough respect. They did lose a lot of pieces, but Jason Henderson is still the anchor of that defense. Ricky Ronnie is a darn good football coach. So I think he's going to have ODU set to play, and I'm worried about that game at ODU this year.
That's a solid pick. I might go Georgia Southern.
That's a solid
I feel like they return some really good players. That offensive scheme is scary. I think they're a little bit slept on right now.
And they got a new quarterback. Their fan base hated their quarterback.
I kind of like that they have a new quarterback. I think that could be good for them.
I think that's very good for them. Zachary Baker, your Slack is going off.
Yeah,
Everything good on your end?
Myself.
You good over there?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Okay. Zachary Baker. Does Taji Hudson being selected to media days mean he will be wide receiver 1? I think he is wide receiver 1-ish. I think the way this offense is going to kind of pan out is that there aren't going to be like a wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. I think it'll be 3 starters. And depending on how the defense shakes out and how the matchups shake out, that's who's going to be funneled the most kind of targets on a weekly basis.
Agreed.
Can I bring up something UVA-centric about this question, though?
Yeah.
Can we talk about Tony Elliott bringing Tony Muskett to ACC media days? And then when people asked him, does this mean he's QB1? He was like, that's an overreaction.
I also, UVA fans are funny because they're like, Colandry is the future. It's like, Muskett's better at quarterback. You play Muskett.
No.
Yes.
No, Muskett's not. Okay, this isn't a UVA podcast. We have to get off this topic. We can't go into a full-on debate about Tony Muskett or Anthony Colandry.
I don't think Colandry is the future as much as people make him out to be. They want Tony Elliott fired, and then they also think he's the future. What are you talking about? Crazy. Anyway.
JMU_71. I highly disagree with you. Are we actually going to tackle in camp this year?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Hopefully. We heard what Delvin Joyce said last week.
I think they will.
JMU_71 with another one, this time a basketball question. How did Coach P get a 4-star kid to put JMU in his Final Four along with 3 SEC schools? What kind of magical recruiting jujitsu is going on in Harrisonburg?
He's like a big man whisperer.
He is. He's like a 6'8", 4-star big man with 3 SEC schools. When I looked at that graphic, I was like, one of these things just doesn't belong here.
He also lists himself at 6'10". So I don't know if he is 6'10" now or if he like was wearing shoes, but like Spradlin works well with big men. Somebody astutely pointed out to us, like only one of those teams in the graphic won an NCAA tournament game last year. Fair. So it's not like the best Power 5 schools you've ever seen. But then I think the case that you make is like, you're going to play here. I develop bigs really well, including one who went from Morehead State to Auburn. So like if you ball out in Harrisonburg for a year or two, You could stay, get an NIL deal, be the man for a good mid-major, or like the SEC schools offering you were going to go from Ole Miss to like
Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn, Kentucky, Alabama. So I don't know, there's an interesting case there that Spradlin's just a dog and knows how to relate to people.
It will be really interesting to see. And I know we've been in this transfer portal era for a little bit, but now it's transfer portal plus NIL era. Be really interesting to see how coaches use that at the mid-major level to attract transfer guys like the Mark Freemans of the world, but then also to attract these 4-star kids. I mean, I think what you said is exactly how JMU got into his Final Four. We'll see if he ends up picking JMU, but if you can kind of pitch it like a stepping stone, I think you can get some really talented kids who may not want to be one and dones, who want to play a full 4 or 5 years at the college level, decide to, hey, I'll come maybe redshirt a year, play 1 year with this team and then jump. I don't think that's a bad setup.
No, it seems like a real possibility. I also think the collective's doing a better job marketing. Shout out to you partially for that with your volunteer work. But I think the collective could secretly be a wagon for the Dukes because they seem pretty clear now that they're like adjusting their model where they'll go out and use it to attract players. I'm not saying they offered the 4-star basketball guy an NIL deal, but like you see some of the guys, right? Dobbs on an NIL deal. Some of these portal players that they got for football and basketball have been in marketing materials showing that they're on deals. It's not just retention like it had been. So I thought that was kind of confusing at first, but the way they're doing it now, I think it does have a chance to actually be pretty valuable in recruiting.
Yeah. Xavier Brown was in one of their pieces. Luke Anderson for basketball. So no clue if it was used for the 4-star. I'm not in on those discussions. As the volunteer, I merely just shoot video and edit some stuff.
But Spradlin is running circles around Byington, with all due respect. He's recruiting guys that Byington wouldn't even consider because of their height. Byington would be like, I'd rather he be 6'4".
Byington's hatred for big men made me absurdly upset.
Do you think Spradlin brought in the 2 like 6'11" guys just as like for us? Like
you listen to the podcast. He's like, all right, we got 2 6'10", 6'11" guys. Be quiet over there. He saw our group chat with Brian Reese and he said, all right, we need to change this from Dukes need to get big to Dukes are big.
Gosh, I'm so happy they did that.
This is from Billy Matthews Jr. on Twitter/X. Interesting to hear Chesney bring up JC Evans. Is this a sign that he's being favored for the 25-26 starting QB spot?
No, I think Chesney explained that kind of clunkily and got some like confusion within the media too when he did that. He, for whatever reason, he brought up just the entrance into the room. So he brought up Dylan Morris, transfer from Washington, and then JC Evans. He also brought them up, he said, because one is the youngest and one is the oldest. I'm not sure the benefit of doing that for the media, who then thought that JC Evans was like in a competition with Dylan Morris, which doesn't seem to be the case. He's exciting because he's like 6'5", 220, so he could be a good prospect. My guess is if Chesney's still here next year, or regardless, I would anticipate them bringing him another transfer that has a good chance. So Evans could certainly compete, but my guess is that the favorite for the 25 starting job isn't on the team.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I say every year, feels like. Who's going to be the starter this year on the roster? He's not on the roster.
Yeah, like the
JMU, ever since I have become a student, Vadley, he was on the roster from 14 to 15. So my freshman year was 15. Vadley, transfer. Brian Shore, technically a transfer into, was that Ben DiNucci next?
Yeah.
Yes. Ben DiNucci, transfer into Cole Johnson. He's the one homegrown talent JMU has had since I've really started following and being a JMU fan. Into
McLeod?
No, Centeo.
Yeah. Please skip my guy. I love Todd too. That's sad.
Todd Centeo into McLeod, into Dylan Morris, and then 25-26 will likely be another transfer QB. JC Evans will have the
Forgot
opportunity.
about Centeo.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, but
Almost
he's
forgot.
probably just like pay attention for either like Power 5 guys who get benched or like G5 guys who are playing well, but the team sucks and the coach is going to get fired. And that's the favorite to win the 25 job.
This is from Such a Tool 1998. Or I guess there's no 19 in it, just 98. JMU 2024 season over under 10 wins.
I want to be optimistic and say over, but the safe play is the under. But I'll say over. I'm pretty bullish.
Okay, I'll be the hater. I'll say under.
Okay.
Any other questions? Let me quickly scroll through everything. I think that's it.
Great. What a podcast.
All right. Thank you all for tuning into the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. Thank you to Bill Papierniak, nailed it, for coming on earlier in the episode to talk all things Flying Squirrels minor league baseball, GMing, what JMU kind of did to prepare him or not prepare him for. That was a great conversation. The full conversation can be found over on our YouTube channel. And be sure to check out our brand new website, jmusportsnews.com. Give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you're on social. We try to be there as well. Bennett, I'll talk to you next week. Maybe see you this weekend. We'll see if your body holds up.
That's right.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.